Today on Inside Utah Politics, the well-being of women in Utah. We're breaking down areas our state is lagging behind and what needs to be done to reverse the disparity moving forward. Plus, the candidates in the 4th Congressional District hit the airwaves. It's the most heated race for Utah's congressional delegation. Our panel will weigh in as it moves into the next stage.
Time now for Inside Utah Politics.
Good Sunday morning, and thanks so much for joining us for Inside Utah Politics. I'm Glenn Mills. We begin this morning with a conversation on gender disparity here in Utah. Annie Studer is with the YWCA Utah, and Samantha Ball is with the Kem C. Gardner Policy Institute up at the University of Utah. So glad to have the two of you with us. Thanks so much for making time to join us.
Thanks for having us on.
Okay, so you guys had a conference last Thursday and Friday based on this very issue, the well-being of women here in the state of Utah. Let's start off with you, Annie. Talk about what that conference was all about. Why did you bring so many people together in the manner that you did?
Well, to lead with, this was the first ever conference of its kind. That's never been done in Utah. It's also unique nationally. We wanted to bring together people from all over the state, from legislators to advocates to the general public, to work with our Director of Public Policy, who's the only full-time person in the state of Utah advocating for women and girls policy. And bring them together because at the YWCA, we believe that when women are thriving, the whole state of Utah thrives.
Okay, so you mentioned that's the first of its kind, but it won't be the last time because you intend on having this as an annual event.
That's correct. Every year that we issue this new report, the Utah Women's Wellbeing Report, will also coincide that with the Utah Women's Policy Conference and build conversations and solve problems.
Okay, we'll get more into that report in just a minute, but Samantha, let's bring you in. Part of that convention was the deliberative engagement model, and it's a process in which brought the people together at the conference. Talk about what that is and how it can be effective.
We were excited to help the YWCA do a deliberative approach, deliberative community engagement approach to talking about these important issues. So there were actually a number of people at the conference who spent a day before learning how to be facilitators for this type of approach. And then the day of, we just went over what the expectations are for a deliberative model, talking about just ground rules of respectfulness and hearing all sides and listening to the data. And this is really just an approach that's, I think, really important now because we've gotten to such a polarized place in our society. And a lot of the forums where we talk about policy issues, people are really at odds and they're not really listening to each other. So this approach is meant to provide you with an opportunity to hear a lot of good factual information. In this case, there were 3 different issue areas and an expert provided a whole half hour of just background information about the issue area. And then tables of people who attended the conference were facilitated by these new facilitators that we had just worked with the day before. There had also been someone who was brought in with that facilitation. They were able to listen to the data, and then they were asked to think about a set of concerns that Erin, the policy director, had come up with that looked at the issues from different vantage points, all sorts of different ways of looking at the issue, and then talk about which of those concerns resonated, which made you think differently about the issue, and kind of maybe most importantly, what voices at the table were missing. So if it was about childcare, for instance, it was an all-day conference, maybe a lot of people who are juggling a couple of jobs and single parents might not have been able to attend, so what would be their concerns? And also, if everybody at the table seemed to agree, what would be the alternative way of looking at this viewpoint that maybe people don't agree with, but with the most positive spin as possible?
Okay, let's break down some of the report. How are women faring now in the state of Utah? And some of the alarming statistics that we saw was around wages. Talk to us about where we stand now in that category.
So nationally, wages are climbing, for women included. And what we saw in this report is that wages for Utah women are actually falling. It's slightly, but that's an alarming signifier of something greater, and we want to dive into that more. Utah women's labor participation is quite high in part-time areas, part-time work. Often that means less benefits, lower wages, And are they not able to go into a higher paid job because they can't find affordable childcare? Is it because they don't have flexible working hours? Looking into that, is it by choice? Is it an entrepreneurial gig on the side? But overall, that wages have gone down is really fairly alarming. There are some good things. Utah women's business ownership is actually on the rise.
Yeah, it seems like maybe some looked at the situation and said, well, I'm just going to take matters into my own hands through that entrepreneurship.
And also, we are the industrial state. We're the beehive state. I mean, women are involved in this just as much as men. Mm-hmm. They're hard workers, and so they're taking the initiative to start their own businesses.
I also noticed in the report that more women were getting their bachelor's degrees.
Yes, more women are finishing their bachelor's degrees, which is a positive note for education. However, when we go into the secondary, higher levels of education, post-secondary degrees, we're still quite low compared to national numbers.
One thing we saw on the opposite side of that as well was the type of job that women are getting in the state of Utah, and it's not in the management and the upper level. Talk about that.
Yeah, we'd call that the professional jobs. Those career opportunities, we saw a fall there, a decrease in women in those upper level positions, which are often going to be the higher paying jobs. So that is definitely contributing to the wage gap. And there's more disparity amongst women of color. Hispanic and Black women are even in fewer positions and many more in the poverty.
Samantha, talk about how vital it is to get data, up-to-date data, when you're talking about issues like this.
So important. That's one of the baselines of having a good discussion, is a lot of times if you have a survey question, it might just be someone's right off the top of the head response, and they don't have a lot of information about even the trends that are, what happens if we don't do anything about this, but also the trade-offs associated with each approach. And so one of the great things about this deliberative approach that we were able to do is that everybody got a really nice overview of the issue, both through the national report and through local experts before they talked about the topic.
Let's talk about moving forward and what needs to be done. As far as policies and working with the legislature, what do you see as very important moving forward to this conversation?
One thing that we really focus on at the YWCA is economic opportunities for women. So is that affordable childcare access? Is that flexible leave? And that's good for men too. The Salt Lake Chamber is actually moving forward with that, seeking out high talent people and a tight workforce. We have a shortage of highly skilled workers, and the Salt Lake Chamber recognized that and actually is trying to bring on more people with these flexible parental leave policies, which benefits women and men and families. Another area that we really feel that's incredibly important here, and we haven't really touched on yet, is health and safety for women. There is maternal mental health. We made a lot of progress last year at the legislature. We need to make more progress, and 1 in 5 Utah women suffer from maternal mental health, anxiety, and depression. And that doesn't just affect them, that affects their child, their spouse, and it also has not only social and emotional issues go along with that, economic issues. People have to stay home from work. And so having a greater conversation and more funding behind maternal mental health is really important. Another area that we're working on at the YWCA is racial justice and looking at opportunities in schools so that it's equitable for everyone, that kids all have the same chance.
I know I see representatives from the YWCA up at the Capitol all the time working for those very issues. So much more we could talk about, but unfortunately we have run out of time. Thanks again for your time this morning. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Still to come, the Medical Cannabis Ballot Initiative is reigniting an age-old debate. Should churches be weighing in? Our panel will take that up a little bit later. But first, voters will be making a statement on education funding in November. We're checking in with our schools now to break down ballot question 1. Stay with us.